I wanted to ask you this, and there's really no necessary way of knowing here, but what I thought that Belichick's reaction to the press conference, you were probably a few feet away, when he was asked about the Falcons, not even knowing that they won. Now, we all know that there's code and disarming the media. I listen. There's no way he did not know who was in the Super Bowl. Come on, man.
You know, it could very well be a situation where the people that are around him are afraid to tell him that because they know he's going to snap back and say, I'm worried about today's game, you know?
Yeah.
I can see him not knowing. The thing that I found less believable along these same lines was that he hadn't seen the Tomlin video. You know, he's got the joke like, I'm not on Snap Face or whatever.
Yeah.
I just think that a person like him who sucks up all this information over the course of a week, it ran across his timeline. He saw it.
Yeah, no, the intentional mixing of Snapchat and Facebook was probably intentional. I agree with you. He just wants us to believe that those facts aren't true. You know, when you look at this team, though, and you talk about that Antonio Brown video and any of these other outside factors that we like to talk about being influential on this team, I honestly believe that they're not. They're so singularly focused. How does he get that out of almost – he gets buy-in from everybody on the team. How does he do that?
Yeah. Well, obviously there's a culture of success. Ginny Vrentis at our site wrote a great story this week about his relationship with Tom Brady and how that kind of affects the rest of what goes on in that building. And the gist of it was that he can criticize Tom Brady at any juncture, and Tom accepts it, and everybody looks at that and says, all right, well, if he's slamming the guy who is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time for a mistake on a Monday morning in practice, then I have no wiggle room here. How can I possibly satisfy this guy? So I think it starts with Brady and the standard that those two set with their relationship. You know, you try to work that locker room as a reporter and get, harmless little nuggets of information about why certain things happened in the game, and you just can't get it because these guys are, I don't want to say in fear of Belichick, but they understand the consequences of every single thing that they do because he's always watching and he's always listening.
You know, in a way, they allow Belichick to control how much fun they have. I mean, if you really think about it.
Oh, definitely.
Which is odd for grown men who have millions in the bank.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why you've seen big personality players come through there, but they never last very long. You look at Randy Moss, Aqib Talib. There's been a number of these guys who from their antics at other places, and as soon as they stepped out of line in any small way in New England, they're gone. And I think the trade-off, and if you'd ask, Chris Long why he came to New England, is he'd say, because I want to win a Super Bowl right now. It's the one place in the NFL where you feel like you have the opportunity to do that every year, even the year when the quarterback is suspended for the first month of the season and you feel like the rest of the division has taken a step ahead. I mean, how many stories did we read in August? Can the Patriots recover from Tom Brady's suspension? Some of that is stirring up drama on the part of the media, and some of that is real. Who knew that Jimmy Garoppolo and Jacoby Brissett were going to keep this team afloat for the first month, and then Tom Brady was going to come and basically run the table? But we should have assumed that.
We should have, but again, we didn't. I'm with you. It's one of the most amazing sporting dynamics I've ever seen, for sure, in my life. We're talking to Robert Klemko with us here, the MMQB.com, great website, and he's with us here on Tiki and Tierney.
Rob, when you look at the guys that get it done, obviously Tom Brady is one, but Chris Hogan's out of nowhere, really, and it's a name that if you in New England, and you've probably grown to love what he's been able to do, especially yesterday. But Gronk is out. They don't really dominate the run game until they get into the red zone where LeGarrette Blount does what he does. It feels like no matter who you plug in, it's going to be successful. Is that the true, I guess, power, strength of Tom Brady? Because it's all these guys. It's Troy Brown. It's It's David Patton from back in the day. It's
Right.
all of these guys who other teams kind of just would slough off and say, okay, you were a good practice squad guy or special teams guy. They're stars in New England.
Yeah. Now let's be careful not to talk about New England like there's some kind of Raiders in the 70s or 49ers era dynasty. Yes, they've been to a lot of Super Bowls, but they also haven't won the majority of the Super Bowls that they've been to. They do run into a wall here at some point. They played a Steelers defense that's really young in the secondary, and you could tell that when they started going hurry up early in the first quarter.
Yeah.
They felt like they were catching these guys out of position and out of sorts. The one really telling moment to me was when they lined up in like an I right, and then they went 5 wide out of that, and everybody in the stadium oohed and awed. And of course, it's like a 20 or 30 yard gain, I believe, to Hogan. I could be wrong on that one, but I think they recognized that they were playing a team that when it became time to it, when it became crunch time, wasn't necessarily experienced or prepared enough to handle big adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
And they took advantage of that, and they went fast. I mean, they couldn't run the ball for this entire game. And it's not even like they substituted the short passing game for it. They just threw the ball downfield to Chris Hogan, like you mentioned. I don't think there's anything spectacular about any of the skill position players on this team except Gronkowski, who's out, and obviously Tom Brady. But the thing that just really impressed me is that Belichick knows exactly how to push the buttons of a defense.
We're going to get hit over the head. Let's get something here on the Falcons. Robert Klemko, the MMQB.com, Tiki and Tierney. We get hit over the head, and rightfully so. The legacy and Matt Ryan try to take the next step, no championships, et cetera. And, of course, that's palpable, standing alone. There's no doubt that's an interesting story. But since we will be immersed in that for a while, what's another interesting story to you about the Falcons that you don't think necessarily has gotten a ton of national play that you think should?
Yeah, I think that Pete Carroll's system in Seattle is one that a lot of people thought, well, that works for Pete Carroll. Having a lot of big personality guys, but bringing them all together and having a family atmosphere that's very much the opposite of, the culture of fear that exists in New England. And I think that Dan Quinn was able to put his own little spin on that, but still keep a lot of those same practices and philosophies and have relatively immediate success in Atlanta. This kind of success that Gus Bradley wasn't able to have leaving Seattle and going to Jacksonville. So I think that's one thing that I'm interested in talking with coaches and learning about in the next 2 weeks is how much of the Seattle experience was translated to Atlanta and what were the things that Dan Quinn wanted to change, what were the little nuances that he added. That's one big storyline. You look at the impact of Kyle Shanahan with Atlanta, and I think one of the more underrated things that he did was stress to Matt Ryan that we really have to diversify this offense because for so many years it was an A.J. Green, Andy Dalton situation where where the ball is going on third down. And I think that that's changed this year for Atlanta in the sense that you have all these options now. 2 running backs, Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman, instead of, tossing some scat back out there and asking him to carry the ball 25 times a game.
Yeah.
5 wide receivers who are viable options on third down as opposed to 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that will be Shanahan's legacy if and when he takes a job after this game here. And I'm just really interested in kind of learning about the dynamic of how all this was put together because this was a team that didn't get a lot of national media coverage for most of the season. I mean, how many times did these guys have a night game in prime time? I don't think it was more than once or twice.
Yeah. Well, we did our job, man. We talked about them a lot. We really did.
Yeah.
I can't rely on the network coverage. I think a lot of people do that. A lot of people have, radio shows, whatever. I think that Tiki and I, this team is good. This is not an accident. I mean, this team is incredible. It's a well-oiled machine. Now, can they win? We'll see. But as you alluded to, a couple of great stories to latch on to. We expect some more great content. That's what you guys do at the MMQB.com. Robert, good spot. Appreciate it, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Be
You
good,
got it,
Rob.
man.